Okay, so I wanted to go over a little bit about how you could approach getting started on this project. So let me go ahead and get rid of some stuff here. And so let me see, I need to choose something. I'm just looking around, and I think what I'm gonna choose is just a flower in a flower pot. That'll be nice and simple. So let me go ahead and take a look and choose one of these. I'm just gonna make this text a little bit bigger here. So happy and light as a feather. Okay. And then anxious and I'll just start with happy and light as a feather, and then I might pick something else. I'm not really sure. So I'm going to shut that off and go ahead and let's see. I'm just going to draw. Now, you of course will break your document. I'll just draw over here. You will break your document. In fact, actually, I need to turn my iPad. In your document, you are going to want to go ahead and, in the same way that you did with the texture and pattern grid, you're going to create an inner rectangle. And then all I want you to do is go ahead and divide that into 8, okay? And then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taping off the edges just like you did on the first project. So what this does is this gives you good practice in craftsmanship on your projects. And then remember to make sure that you're using artist tape, okay? Because even if you're using like painter's tape for like painting, that stuff can work okay, but it's still gonna rip your paper. Even though the Bristol board is pretty tough, I don't know, it could still be a problem. So let me go ahead and shut that off and just start a new layer here. Okay, so let me just twist this around. It's easy for me to forget that I need to have this in a landscape. Okay, so happy and light as a feather. All right, so here's, let's say, my first cell. And so what I can think about is not only, I can think about the types of lines that I want to make that are going to conceptually, inform this like light as a feather and happy sort of feeling. But I also want to think about like, how can I draw a flower in a flower pot so that it's, looking that way. And I think what I'm going to do is the heavy part of a flower pot is the pot itself. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it so that it's like floating up in the air. So let me see if I can show you what I mean. I'm going to have the flower pot. I just wonder if I could like have it kind of almost off a little bit. So it kind of looks like it's floating up this way. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw the rim part of it. And then Here's the stem. I'll go back and do the details in just a moment. And then I think for this flower, I'll like have the petals kind of lifting up into the air. So let me see. I'm gonna have this one. It's already upright. And I'm just gonna go around. And I'm gonna draw it almost like it's reaching up. Now, one easy way that you could go with on this, and it's fine if you do this, is you can use facial expressions if you're comfortable with that. I would challenge you maybe not to, but you could use facial expressions. So I could very easily just, kind of draw these little eyes and have this big sort of smiley face. But I'm going to try to challenge myself and express that without using a face. But you are more than welcome. You are more than welcome to do that if you like. So here's the stem. Now, while you're doing this, you also want to try, you're still thinking about composition. You're still thinking about visual weight and balance. So you do need to use a balance of black and white, which is a lot of what we're going to be focusing on in this class because it is basic composition. And then a balance of black and white, pattern and texture, and then, the use of grayscale if you so wish to use that. Okay, so there's that. I think I'm also going to have like these seeds kind of coming out off of the flower. So normally on a flower you would see this kind of thing kind of going on. But I think I'm going to kind of suspend those in the air. But first, I think I want to draw some details on my flower petals first. So I'm going to render out some texture on these petals that would be a little bit realistic, but I'm going to abstract it just a little bit. So I'm going to just go through and add some details. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add this like kind of, I don't know. And I want you to know too that you should probably only be spending, I don't know, like 15 minutes on each one of these. I've been drawing for a really long time, so I don't expect you to just like come up with stuff as easily. I've been doing this forever, but I don't want you to spend too much time on it. I don't want you spending hours and hours and hours on this. It's just an exercise. So I guess what I'm saying is if, be somewhat spontaneous when you're kind of drawing your different cells with the different characteristics. So, I want you to do your best, but I don't want it to take way too long because we have a lot of stuff to do in this class. And so anyways, just remember it's an exercise. And I don't want you to like be doing and redoing stuff over and over again. You can save that energy for your large scale projects, not these exercises. But you still want to practice. One thing that you can kind of think about with these is you can practice good craftsmanship with your drawings. So what I mean by that is nice clean lines. I do expect to see that. Concentrate on working on your brush work. So for these little seeds, I think I'm gonna do this kind of weird abstract thing where they're kind of coming out and floating up. And this is what's so great about art and design, is that there aren't any rules to any of this. You can make up and do whatever you like. Now, I think I've got the main part of my concept here down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in, I'm going to add some tiny kind of abstract lines that sort of replicate what I have going on in the seed, like the seeds coming out of the center of the flower, but that also kind of replicates this idea of light as a feather and happy. So I'm going to just kind of give the feeling that there's this kind of liquid floating up. And then what this will do also is it will balance my composition a little bit more. So I have a nice balance of black and white going on. Okay, so what I want you to think about is make sure that you are practicing good craftsmanship. So once you get your main areas colored in, I want you to go back, if you're using marker or if you decided to use ink with your brush or black paint. I really suggest using marker on this assignment, but you really can choose whatever. But I want you to go back and make sure you have really nice line work. So go back and sharpen your edges. And this will help you develop a steady hand. Now, I know a majority of design work gets done digitally. But it's good to have this practice because even when you draw digitally, you need to have a steady hand. So you might as well get used to it with the analog materials. And then as you move forward in your education, you can, use that steady hand if you're ever painting digitally. But it's just good to get a nice, clean line. So make sure you're going back. If you're using a marker and the marker is like looking like this, you want to go back in and darken it so that it's nice and even in the areas that you intend it to be. Now, I'm not going to go through and do that with all my line work here because otherwise this demo would be really, really long and you don't want to be sitting here forever. Okay, so I think what I need now is I need some texture, and I want to do kind of a bubbly texture on this pot. So I'm going to go ahead and add in, I'm just going to use some circles and use kind of a bubbly looking sort of texture. I'm going to make my lines a little thinner because this is where the light and happy comes in. Okay, so this is where I'm going to come in and do a little bit of shading. I'm going to use gray because that will kind of show what a pencil might look like. So I'm going to go ahead and use gray and go in and give a little bit of dimensionality to this bubbly texture. So I'm just going to use some light value shading on the edges here. And I think I need to maybe do a little bit more black, be a little bit more dramatic, because it's not really looking as dimensional as I want. So come in with what would be like a darker, a darker pencil, or just pushing a lot harder. Okay, so I'm not going to color all these in because it will take forever, but if we back out a little bit, you can see how that gives a little bit of depth to the pattern on the flower pot, but it's not heavy. It feels light and obviously bubbly because of the bubbles. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and do like a light dotted texture on the top of the flower pot. Okay, and so I think this is looking pretty good. I would say that I might need to come in. I do think these need to have a continuation and be a little bit thicker and have a heavier presence towards the bottom. So I think I'm going to come in and just connect all my drippies that are going upward. I'm just going to come through and connect those together. And it might be cool if there's some drippies coming off of this thing too, just to give a little bit more added visual interest here towards the top. So I'll make these a little bit more pointed. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. I think that I probably still need to add in some visual weight overall. I could maybe come in and just add a little bit more pattern here. So maybe I'll do like a crisscross thing in the corner, something that still feels light and happy. Actually, these lines, let's see. So this is pretty abstract. I don't know really what this is, but it's just added line work. But what that can do is, by doing this, I guess it kind of looks like a weird web in the corner. But these lines actually, if we think about how the eye is going to travel through this composition, these lines kind of lead the viewer to go, I would say if my eye were to travel through this composition, it would go something like this, and then travel down and look at these drips. Something like that. So even though this area is fairly abstract, it's actually doing a lot in regards to adding to the composition. And I'm still really just not happy with the bottom, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to make these a lot more present in the composition. And this is how you work through, This is how you work through and decide how much visual weight and where. So maybe I don't do it on all of them. Maybe it's just these ones towards either corner. And, I never really know how long this is going to take me when I record these videos. So I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to do any more. Otherwise, yeah, I have this whole piece of paper here. I'm not going to do any more because these videos would be forever. But I hope this is helpful in starting to think about your emotional line exercise. So, just let me know if you have any further questions. And good luck with this and try to have fun with it. Okay, bye. Okay, so what I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about today in regards to brushes and paint is that if you've not used acrylic paint, I don't know if you can see, I have just a little bit of water in here. I would use a jar of water or something probably, but just for this demo so you can see everything. I just put water in the center here. So typically when someone uses acrylic paint for the first time, their instinct is to just put it in here and start painting right away. But let's say you have a very fine line. Actually, let me go ahead and just sketch something on this paper. So let's say I'll do something similar to what I was doing in the digital demo. You have something like this that you need to paint. And actually let me draw 2 of these so you can see the difference. Okay. So your first instinct might be just to dip the brush in the paint and start drawing right away, or painting, excuse me. And so you're gonna come in here, and I've been doing this for a long time, so I actually have a pretty steady hand. You're probably gonna notice that it's chunky and it's a little bit hard to do fine lines. What you want to do is you want to use the water to dilute the paint on your brush a little bit, and you don't want to have too much paint. Like this much paint isn't really going to work very well. It's too much. So you want to have an amount of paint to where you've got paint in your brush and maybe a little bit on the tip there. And then you're going to just lightly dip it in the water and then kind of mix it a little bit. So just a little dip in the water, not too much. Might even get a little bit more paint. Now this takes time. I mean, this is not science or anything. Or maybe it is technically on a chemical level, but in terms of figuring the balance out, it just takes time and practice. So if I dilute that paint a little bit, what I'm gonna notice is that I get a little bit more control because the paint is thinner now. Ink, you don't really need to worry about this too much because ink is pretty thin, but with the acrylic paint, it's pretty thick. I mean, it's technically a plastic. But you can see, like, I can make lines with this paintbrush now that are very, very fine, even though this paintbrush is pretty big. Now, when you have big areas that you need to paint, I would suggest using one of your brushes that are flat, like this. And when you're doing like a big area, you don't need to dilute the paint at all. You can just paint. You can just paint your big area as you wish, but as you come in and do those fine edges, and we're shooting for good, steady hand and craftsmanship, you want to dilute it with water a little bit so you have maximum control over how that edge looks and is behaving. When you get low, when your paint starts to get low and it starts to get jagged, flip it over. Now, there's this technique called running a bead, and this is across all kinds of mediums. It doesn't matter whether it's acrylic or if you're doing wax on ceramic pots or what it is. But anyways, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna get your brush pretty wet with paint. Go ahead and dilute it with water a bit. And what that is when you're running a line, let me just move this a bit. When you're running a line on a piece of paper, you get what is known as a bead that forms kind of at the center. So I'm using this brush differently now. I'm not using it flat like this, but I've turned it to the side. And a little bead of paint will form at the front of it. And what you're noticing here is that I'm getting a nice, flat, straight line. And that little bead that forms at the front is kind of my team lead, I guess. and it allows you to create a really nice line. Now this takes time and practice. You're not going to get it right away, but you know, hopefully this quick little demo will give you some things to think about when you're using your brush to get nice crisp lines on the edges of your imagery. Okay, well, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.